June 6th at 6 p.m. We'll start by the invocation being brought to us this evening by Justin Brown, Trinity Baptist Church, and be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Charlie, and I'm sorry, I don't know Charlie's last name, but he'll share it with us when he gets up here. He'll be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all join me, please.
Father God, we thank you for this evening, Lord. We thank you for this beautiful town that you've given us, Lord. Thank you for the opportunity to come together. God, I just pray that you would bring wisdom into this place, Lord. Thankful for the leadership that's here. Pray that you would be here with us, God, as we're making these decisions. Father, I pray that this place would be full of grace, that we would be looking for the best interest of everyone. Lord, we thank you. We praise you. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Charlie Weinstein, and it's 56. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two.
Thank you both. Ms. Burkowski, would you like to call roll, please?
Mayor Lake,
Here.
Vice Mayor Hart.
Here.
Councilman Bobby Brown.
Here.
Councilman Tony Brown. Here. Councilwoman Thompson.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Mayor.
We'd like to make an adjustment to the agenda this evening. Under presentations was the Clay County School District, who was not able to attend. Is there a consensus that we remove this from the agenda?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Ms. Burkowski, do you have any public comment cards?
I have comments for under public hearing.
Okay. And we'll go to item 3, public hearing. Item A is Country Meadows zoning first hearing. We have the applicant here with his support staff. Would you like to begin your presentation, please?
Good afternoon. Pleased to be here. My name is Terrell Arline. I'm with the law firm Ansbacher Law out of Jacksonville, and I represent the applicant in these two matters, the variance and the plan unit development. I want to just begin by introducing our team. Just at 30,000, and then I want to focus on some of, I think, the important provisions of your code that you need to apply or will be applying tonight, and just highlight some of those. And then I'm going to pass it off to the experts, our planner and our engineer, to make the presentation to y'all. So introducing our team, Jed Ducro is the president of Ducro Development Group, the applicant here for the PUD and the variance. With them is Mike Bell. He's a professional engineer with Bell Engineering and Consulting here in the city. And Misty Servia is an AICP planner that's worked on this project. And we also have the builder, Tim Moxley, Division Manager of Century Complete Homes. The other individual there, Jeff Buckles, who's our professional engineer for transportation, was unable to make it. But you'll hear from Mr. Bell and Ms. Servia. So basically, we will present the variance request for vary the project from your tree preservation, environmental preservation ordinance, and we'll get into that in more detail, and ask that you rezone the property to plan unit development. Now, let me just get into some sort of the code provisions that I think are going to be important here. Pass these out. There's only a couple pages.
And you'll be patient with us since this is, for myself, the first time we've looked at a PUD. So you'll have to maybe say things twice in a different way for us to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that's why I'm doing this, because I understand that it's a need for y'all. Let me just tell you that I'm a land use lawyer. I've been practicing land use law for 40 years, dealt with a lot of PUDs. I used to be a county attorney, dealt with a lot of PUDs from the government side. So, I have some familiarity with them. They're a common land use regulatory process. They happen virtually everywhere in all the local governments, counties in the state. And what it is intended to do is to allow the local government to be flexible in the application of their land development code for a particular development. And if you all determine that it's in the public interest. So whereas if you just went in and built under the zoning, all of the zoning criteria, sets, lot sizes, side yard setbacks, all that stuff would apply to straight zoning. But when you rezone to planned unit development, which is what you have in your code, it's in chapter 17, section 117.145. I passed it out to you. And it's not the whole plan unit development provision. I just gave you the parts that I want to focus on. Section A says that the purpose of the plan unit development district is to provide a method for landowners to submit proposals for unique zoning district provisions for individual plan unit developments which are not provided for or allowed in the zoning district. So right off the bat, it's a process for rezoning for development for particular criteria that are not otherwise allowed for the zoning. And then it goes on to say rezoning for plan unit developments will be an entirely voluntary procedure, which it is. We weren't forced to do this. And the approval of planned development rezoning rests entirely with the Keystone Heights City Council after review and recommendation of plan board. So it's a flexible approach. It allows you to vary the provisions of your code, and it's entirely in your hands if you determine that it's in the public interest. Go on a little bit on the objective. Hits that again. Plan development provisions are intended to promote flexibility in design. City Council has the absolute authority to establish the limitations and regulations thereon for the benefit of the public health, welfare, and safety. And those are the applications of regulatory provisions or what you want to require as conditions of the PUD in the process. And then the end of it, it says it again. It talks about this flexibility. It says that the plan unit development provisions are designed to allow a landowner to submit any proposals for consideration and allow the Keystone Heights City Council to approve any proposal which it determines to be in the best interest of the public health, welfare, and safety. So it's in your zoning code. It's typical. It's used in many communities, and it allows you to vary the standards in the zoning code that would otherwise apply to just the straight zoning development. The provision 17-149 tells you what you do to evaluate these PUD plans as they come in. And it tells you in subsection P, all building, housing, and other land use regulations of this code are applicable to a planned development, except those permitting special permits and variances, and except to the extent they are in conflict with a specific provision of the approved plan. And so you can approve a PUD plan that varies from the other applicable provisions of the land use code. And then I've highlighted the rest of that paragraph where it says all such land use regulations shall apply in other areas of a planned development in a manner determined by the city council as part of the approved development plan. So once again, I'm just hitting on it's flexible, intended to be that way. And so we've submitted a variance request. We actually submitted two, one for a burn plan, which was approved by the Planning Commission, which is not before you tonight, and then another one that varies the application of your landscaping tree preservation code provisions. That's going to be presented to you. And we propose the rezoning to PUD. I just think that in the PUD process, you can give the same flexibility that you would give in a variance. In many places, you don't even need to apply for a variance if you're seeking a PUD, because the PUD provides the authority for the local government to essentially do the same thing and waive setbacks or lot size or things like that that you would seek under the variance. Here we've done them both together because that was a recommendation of staff, and they'll both be presented to you, but I just want you to understand that, you know, under the PUD ordinance, you've got the flexibility to give my client and what he's seeking in the variance. They sort of are hooked together there. So we believe you can approve both the variance as requested and the PUD provisions that you determine are sufficient regarding the landscaping and tree preservation provisions. Now let me just hit something really quick and then I'll shut up about that, and that's traffic. I know that traffic is a concern. Impacts to roads are a concern, but the issue about your concurrency ordinance and levels of service and payment of improvements and making improvements to roads are not done at the PUD process. That's done when an application comes in for development, it's engineered, you've got your transportation work done, you know how many units are going to be out there, and your concurrency management ordinance essentially says that it applies at the time that a development permit is issued. So while our engineer is going to explain that the roads that are impacted is a county road and a city road, a county road and a DOT road, we're going to address those issues once the project's designed out and we actually know what all the trip generation and all of that is. The rezoning is not an application to develop the site where you would actually get into traffic, is essentially what I'm saying. The other thing is that, so we'll address traffic. The PUD gets approved once the project's engineered and fleshed out in more detail, and we'll do what is required from a transportation standpoint. Let me just mention a little bit about tree preservation. That's an issue here. My clients made a presentation to the Planning Commission and the tree issue came up. And so after that, on May 24th, Mr. Ducrose sent a letter with an analysis of the site that specifically addressed tree preservation and what they were proposing to do. And that letter was passed out to the city manager on May 24th, and I believe your staff has had an opportunity to review that. We also did a survey of the trees on site, and that's been introduced to staff, which identifies essentially the tree areas on the site where you don't have roads and house pads. So they've taken the roads and house pads out of the forested area, and they focused on everything that doesn't need to be in a road or a lot, which obviously you've got to cut the tree down to put a house pad and a lot on it. And that drawing will be shown to you tonight. I mean, it was a pretty in-depth analysis of the trees. And then the last thing I want to say about the tree preservation is your code, Chapter 17-220, deals with this environmental preservation. And the last section of it I've passed out to you, subsection 3, deals with off-site mitigation. So your code provides that you can address tree preservation on-site, or you can address it to some extent off-site. I think it says a compromise of 50% of the number of trees required. And here's my point, is that it allows an applicant to pay money into the city's streetscape fund to offset as offsite mitigation. And Mr. Ducro it's a little difficult to figure out what that number is, but he did an analysis. We did a survey of the trees and has proposed to pay into the streetscape fund $10,000 for offsite mitigation that would go towards landscaping in the city. And I'm not an expert on landscaping, but that I would expect would buy a good bit of trees. So one minor point that I know the vice mayor brought up at the last meeting, and I want to specifically address this. He was correct about, it had to do with the declarations of covenants and restrictions governing a homeowners association in the PUD, okay? And he noted some concerns and some problems with the draft declarations of restrictions and covenants. And I just wanted to tell you all, and the vice mayor specifically, that our law firm, Ansbacher Law out of Jacksonville and St. Augustine, they do a lot of homeowners work in the northeast quadrant of Florida. And we are going to propose a whole new set of declarations, covenants, and restrictions before we come back for the second.
Can I just address that? And thank you for mentioning it. It looked like boilerplate to me that was just sort of plugged in and like a rough draft. And when you're done, I just have a couple of questions, but I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention that we were hoping we could get the draft restrictions due today, but we have some absences in the office and we weren't able to draft it. But we're fully capable of doing that, and we intend to get that to you before you make your second, reading. So just to conclude, thanks for your consideration for the request for the variance and the approval of the PUD rezoning. We believe that our experts, the engineer and the planner, will give you a sufficient basis to approve both the variance and the PUD rezoning. The variance, like I said, allows the city's tree preservation standards to be addressed to the extent that they can. I mean, the site is totally vegetated, and obviously you can't clear the site and develop it for the zoning that's authorized by the comp plan unless you cut some trees down for roads and pads. So we think we'll make a presentation on a fair way to apply your tree code to this project and under the PUD criteria, you can accept those. And you could grant the variance because of the undue hardship that developing this property with the density that's allowed in the comp plan is difficult, but you can also do it in the PUD ordinance. So I passed out I worked with your attorney on the draft ordinance, and you should have it. And most of all of the draft ordinance is his work. I just want to draw your attention to section 4, which I propose that it be included in the ordinance that deals with special conditions. And this is where you dovetail in the flexibility and the points that you all think need to be made for a PUD. This is how you put it in the ordinance, okay? And so I've added a section on special conditions, and honestly, A through I, those are the things that are on the face of the site plan. That's the variations of I think it's lot width that's being varied, and the lot area is being varied, and our engineer will explain that. But those are the specific conditions on this PUD. And then the last one, J, is that mentioned that Duck Row Development Group will pay into the city's streetscape fund the sum of $10,000 as offsite mitigation pursuant to your code. So we're asking that you go ahead and approve the variance and approve the PUD with these special conditions. And right now we will call our...
Counselor, may I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Your handout does not include a reference to section 17-102. I assume you have that. That was probably just an oversight that you didn't put in there, but we'll be reading that into the record later since we are on the record. The second question that I have, Are you suggesting that we should not be considering traffic when we make our deliberation?
What I'm saying is that the whole issue about concurrency and what the proportionate share mitigation will be is something that you would do later, not at the
Your
PUD
exhibits,
process.
though, have opened that door. Your expert has addressed the traffic issues, so I think it's probably going to be on the table. Out of fairness, I'm mentioning that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Excuse me. Call Misty Segarra, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Misty Servia. I am a certified land use planner, AICP certified planner. I'm also a county commissioner in Manatee County, so I look at you guys as my colleagues. Thank you for holding this hearing tonight. I'm pleased to be here representing the Country Meadows project, and you will see, if we could go to the next slide, you will see tonight that this project is the result of 15 months of coordination between the city staff and the property owner. There have been numerous meetings with the community, including the Lake Region Development Corporation, community and civic groups like the Kiwanis Club, and a neighborhood workshop. And all of that input has resulted in us putting together and hearing opinions, and I think culminated into a great project. Before I get started, I really want to thank the staff. They have been exceptional and very, very helpful to us. So it's always nice when you have questions and you're filing these things to be able to reach out and call your staff, and they have been great. Okay, next slide, please. So our request is a rezone from residential, which allows 6 dwelling units per acre, to planned unit development with approval of the development plan for a single-family subdivision. Our proposed density is 3.97 units per acre. Your comprehensive plan shows that up to 6 dwelling units per acre is allowed on this property. Next slide, please. So how does the city define this land? I told you about the zoning. The land use category is residential single family. Now, I heard someone say that you guys have not seen a PUD before, so I thought I'd just kind of slow down and talk a little bit about the process. You know, your comprehensive plan is kind of like the recipe for 30 years on how you want your city to develop. You know, it's a very broad brush approach to designing how your city is going to develop. It's the vision, if you will. The proposal before you today is fully consistent with your comprehensive plan. When this parcel was annexed into the city decided that they would designate it residential single family, thereby telling everyone and your community, we want residential single family on this site. Next slide, please. Compatibility. So I feel like as a land use planner, it's all I talk about is compatibility. It's one of the most important aspects of planning a project. You want to make sure that it's compatible or that it fits in with the surrounding area. Back in Manatee County earlier, or last week, we had a proposal for a 52-foot tall circus tent come in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And I said, this is not compatible. There's going to be noise, there's going to be lights, it's 52 feet tall, and you have all these single-family homes that are much shorter than that. And I made an argument as a commissioner from the dais that it just didn't fit in, and it didn't, and it was denied. This project fits in. You have single-family homes located south and west of this site. To the east is your city park, and we have a commercial area, including a cemetery and an auto shop to the north. You will see when we show you the site plan that there is a large tree preservation area separating the proposed homes from the existing development to the north. And sometimes that's how you achieve compatibility too. When you have different uses like residential and commercial, sometimes if you create separation or screening with trees, it helps to make them compatible because you can't see and hear and feel the differences in the land use. This property is high and dry. It's not in a flood zone. Another reason that your plan calls for single-family residential development in this area. Advantages to the city, next slide, please. Sorry. Are many. So it's, of course, going to expand your ad valorem tax base, which adds to the consistent revenue that the city needs to maintain your public facilities. You know, I know this as well as you guys do, that Florida is experiencing a major housing shortage, and particularly affordable housing for our families. There's just an acute lack of supply, and we have 900 people a day moving to the state of Florida. The pandemic actually accelerated growth in Florida, and it's pushing that population into the smaller cities like Keystone Heights. So a project like Country Meadows will be in very high demand, and it will bring forth the opportunities for your local merchants. It will create jobs for the construction industry and your trades. And this is an area where public utilities are available, and the growth will be sustainable and smart because the timing is appropriate. You also know this, that new neighborhoods help to bring diversity and strengthen the community. Could we move to the next slide, please? So why rezone to planned unit development? You heard a little bit from the attorney about that. Planned unit development is designed to allow flexibility so that a city can say, well, we really like this and we want you to do that. But it's also contract zoning, if you will, and that's why you have an ordinance before you tonight. It requires the developer to strictly adhere to the contract or the ordinance for development of this land. So you have more assurances of what you will get in this particular project. If there are significant deviations from it, they have to come back before you to get approval to vary from it. You know, the staff encouraged us to submit a planned unit development, as does your comprehensive plan. And I like the PUD concept. We see it a lot where I'm from in Manatee County. It just provides more transparency to the city and the community about the project that is proposed and what you're going to get at the end. It allows for that innovative type of project. I think as our engineer talks about the tree preservation areas, you'll see that. Because if we were bringing forth just a standard subdivision in Euclidean zoning, these trees would all be wiped out. But we are preserving a lot of the trees. We have a tree preservation area, and many of the trees in the rear project line will be preserved. Again, good neighborhoods enhance the quality of life in a community. So Mike's soon going to bring up a site plan, and you'll see that our lots are wider than required by the standard zoning code, but they're a little bit less deep. So your zoning code requires a minimum of 50-foot wide lots. We are proposing 55-foot wide lots. Let me tell you what that does. When you're driving down the street, you will see more space between the homes. And to me, that's the most important thing, is the width rather than the depth, because you get more light and air coming in between the homes. Your code requires a minimum of 135 feet of lot depth. Our lot depth is 110 feet. And there is a product, and the builder is here today to talk to you about it. I think you've seen the building elevations in the packet to show you what those homes could look like. The site is heavily treed, and that PUD process has allowed us to preserve a good percentage of those trees while also efficiently using the land. Your Planning and Zoning Committee recommended approval of the rezone. We respectfully ask for approval tonight of the rezone, and I'm going to ask Mike to come up and go through the site plan.
Could I ask just one
Of
question,
course.
please? You use the term affordable housing. Can you put a definition to that, please?
Well, I don't know what your city definition is of affordable housing. It's different in every community. I'm sorry? Okay, yeah, we can have the builder come up and talk about it, but this is housing that will be affordable to your families. I'm not saying it's affordable with a capital A, as I like to say. You know, there's no grant application or extra density required here, but these will be affordable family homes.
So that varies by community, and you're not familiar specifically with this community as to
We're not-
what would be affordable?
We're not asking for any benefit of the affordable housing
Yeah.
requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Next slide, please. Again, my name is Mike Bell. I'm a professional civil engineer. I was born and raised in Keystone Heights, went to Keystone High School. Went to University of Florida, and I've been a practicing civil engineer in land development for 38 years. Graduated in 1979 here. I have a lake house on Lake Brooklyn. Family lives in town, so I'm up here quite a bit back.
I think we can stipulate you're an expert.
Thank you.
That's
Is
just
that-
for,
is
that's
that
just
from
for, that's just for the record.
From Keystone Heights High School, right?
That too.
So I appreciate the opportunity to be here to speak before you. We have done a lot of work, and I'll go through, this is just a site acreage aerial, I think everybody knows where it's at. Next slide, please. So this is the site plan, and I'm going to go through a little bit of the site analysis that we have put into this. And I think everybody's kind of hit on it a little bit, but those of you that have been around a long time, in 2008, I think the city reached out to this property owner and asked for them to look at annexing into the city. Reason being, it's, there's only a few places that can be annexed. I think the other 37, 39 acre parcel around the same time was looked at. So the only two development parcels left in the city that are talked about in your comp plan are these two parcels. So your planning exercise of your comp plan, throughout the comp plan, talks about this property and the one that's off Commercial Circle. Again, the density that was assigned to this being residential was 6 units per acre. Everything in your comp plan talks about the potential density, the potential utility use. Everything is calculated based on 6 units per acre, which would be about 83 units on this particular parcel. So again, it's not new to anyone that's lived here, anybody familiar with real estate, anyone familiar with development would know this parcel is not going to be a parkland one day, or that it's going to be preserved for life. It is slated by the city to be residential, so there's no question about that. It shouldn't be a question. So as we started reaching out and planning this, we met with the city staff many times, and again, thank you for the input and help. The PUD, I think everybody explained it a little bit. My opinion is it's flexible, and it's also it's flexible on both sides. So it gives us some opportunity to do things that are a little bit different. And I think, Mr. Hart, you asked last time what made it different that it's a PUD. Mm-hmm. And I think the difference is if we were doing the straight zoning, and that's what you call if we just went to the residential single-family zoning, it has the standards, we would follow those, and that's all you get. If we go to a PUD, we don't have to follow all of those. We can ask for something a little different, but we give something back that's a little different. So what we did here was we knew trees were an issue. We have a lot of trees. So when we looked at the PUD, we started looking at the buffer requirements for this property. There are 0 buffer requirements for this property. So the external buffer, we don't have to have a buffer between any of the uses that surround us. So as you can see in this site plan, the cross-hatched area, it's a different width on the north, the south, the east, and the west for different reasons. But we have an area that we've designated as a tree-safe area. So the trees within those buffer areas on all 4 sides will maintain as they are. We may clean them up, take out dead wood. But the trees that are there that are savable will all be in a tree-safe area and remain. So that's one thing we did different. The second thing was, and per the PUD, we needed to put in some recreation type areas. So within the center of the parcel between the roadways, the internal crosshatched area, there's kind of 2 pods there. That will be open space, park area, dog walk, common area for the neighborhood to use. And within that area, the trees of size that are, I say decent trees, will be preserved so that it'll be a park-like setting. Again, to save every tree doesn't make sense in an area like this. If you haven't seen it, it's full of trees of many sizes, but many are small, many are below 4 inches. Your code requires you to count them from 4 inches up. So we've done a tree count on the 4 inches and up, and in general, a common statement would be that less than between 4 and 8 inches is 75% of the trees on the property. Above 8 inches is about 25% of the trees on the property. So there's a lot of smaller ones that are 4 to 8 inches. 25% of them are larger. So again, we've calculated trees, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But just from the PUD standpoint, that's what we think is different. Again, we have water and sewer available. From the city standpoint, that's controlled growth. You've planned for it. It's not going to be 55 lots that are spread out over 100 acres so that you've got septic tank and wells. Again, it's planned growth. So with that, the perimeter buffers are not required, but we've got them. The open space we talked about, sidewalks are provided on one side of the streets for safety and as required. We also put a crosswalk on the south entry road that'll connect or be a place where you can connect to Sunrise Park for the park use. We have 2 means of vehicular access for convenience and safety. If one happened to be blocked for an emergency, there's another way out of the neighborhood. Water and sewer will be constructed internally at the developer's cost. A lift station will be constructed at the developer's cost for the sanitary sewer. It ties into CCUA, Clay County Utility Authority. And once constructed and approved, those utilities will be turned over to the authority for their operation and maintenance. The roadways will be constructed by the developer in accordance with city standards, and again turned over to the city for operation and maintenance at the end after the plat's completed and certified. Curb and gutter is proposed on the roadways, again with the sidewalk on one side. No open drainage or ditches will be in the roadway sections. The overall drainage design is in accordance with the city standards and St. Johns River Water Management District. It does provide the required stormwater treatment and attenuation. The south area, you can see there's a large cigar-shaped piece of land there. That is all dry retention. The water table is quite deep here, so that'll be a grass dry retention. It won't be wet. It meets all city setback requirements for residential lots. So the standard zoning for setbacks, the residential, we stuck with all of those standards, so we're not asking for anything different for the front setback, the rear setback, and the side setbacks for the building construction. The lot width, as Misty stated, we're proposing 55 feet. The minimum per the city is 50 for a non-PUD or straight zoning. The minimum lot dimension that we're asking for, though, is 110. And the straight zoning for residential requires 135. And the proposal that we have here that I will talk about a little bit, probably half of the lots will be deeper than the 110. If you can imagine the lot lines that are on the west side, on the left, and on the north side, and on the dry retention side, we can extend, when we plat those lots, we will extend those lot lines in the plat, so they will be more than 110 feet. Some may be 145, some may meet your typical standards. The ones on the north will. The only ones that really are going to be in question are the back-to-back lots in the center. These are right at 110 deep. So these are 110. These we show as 110, but when we plat it, we can plat into this easement, the lake easement. We can plat to this property line and pick up that 15 feet. So those will be 125. On the north side, they'll be larger than your depth. So the minimum we're asking for is specific to, it's a general statement to say 110, but are actually more than 50% of our lots will meet the code. That's it. Next slide, please. So that's everything I just talked about, so we can move on. Next slide. So we've heard a lot of discussion, we've heard a lot of comment, we've picked up information from One thing that wasn't mentioned, we did have an open house on the site. Mayor showed up, Lynn showed up. We had a few people from the neighborhood on a rainy day. But we did want to collect input, and one thing we have heard many times is this plan does not look like Keystone Heights. It's not Keystone. And I think part of it is there isn't anything that's been constructed in Keystone that's a subdivision in 40 years. So when you look at the land development regulations, which are similar to every city and county around the state these days, the requirement of paved roads, curb and gutter, minimum lot size, utilities, all of the things that add to the cost of improvement to put together a subdivision, they all start looking the same. So it's not by chance that this is what a subdivision looks like. But these are nice subdivisions, and I wanted to show this just for typical, none of these are our subdivision. These are just different subdivisions I wanted to give you an idea of. And when we talk about trees, these subdivisions show you what a sidewalk on one side will look like. So the bottom two show you the typical section that we're proposing with a sidewalk on one side. The one on the top right also has a sidewalk on one side. And they have 2 street trees per lot, which is exactly what we propose. They may be in the lot, as seen in some pictures. If the city is okay with it, we'll put it between the sidewalk and the back of curb, and they'll be more of a street tree. Either way, they turn out by the time they get a little taller, as they are in the top right, they become shade trees for the sidewalk for the neighborhood. So part of the tree planting that we are doing is 2 trees per lot. And I just wanted to show you these pictures, just so it's not, everybody has seen these type of neighborhoods, but it's going to be not an average neighborhood. It's going to be something that's not typical to Keystone Heights, but it's a 55-foot lot subdivision that will be very well done. So, next slide, please. So the last thing I want to talk about is the tree mitigation. And this was part of our PUD plan, and we have modified this as we have moved forward. A few slides forward, we did do a tree survey of the areas that are not in the roadway right away and not within the building pad. So we had Pat Welch, who did the survey for the property, go out, and I'll show it to you in a few minutes, but we located every tree type and size within that area that's not colored. That is colored, I'm sorry, and came up with a number of trees. So with that calculation, we have some numbers that we're proposing. So just for reference, again, the shaded area in blue is that perimeter buffer for tree safe areas, and the green area is the rear property that we are calling about 1.5 acres that we will locate the trees within that do not have to be cleared, that are of size, that we can save those as the builder comes in to build his home. So that area is flexible, and then within the recreation areas that are pink and around the dry retention area where we're not excavating, any tree within those areas that's of size we will save also. And I say of size, we're not going to save every little tree that's going to be clustered up, but any tree that's a nice tree of 5 or 6 or 8 inches, we're going to save that, trim them up so that area will still be treed, as well as the buffer on the south side and the blue area around it. Again, those areas will be, if we plat through those as discussed, those areas will be part of the protection of that will be through the HOA documents. It'll show up as a tree protection area in the platted lots, and it'll also be on the plat and be called out as a tree protection area within the plat. So those areas will be shown as tree preservation. We also, as I discussed, we're going to be installing 2 trees per lot, which will be 110 trees. And then the developer has also volunteered to put 50 supplemental trees in areas where there may need to be some supplemental tree planting, whether it's in the park or to fill in a gap in a buffer, but we've got 50 more trees that are designated by the developer. And as the attorney said, the last proposal included a $10,000 contribution to the tree fund.